If you want us to go backwards, we can.
No, it's fine. It's no problem. When I was watching, again, the previous watch, I saw a few things that would be kind of interesting to zoom in on, and I suspect we'll see some more of those as we get up in that steeper area.
What did you call it that we're zooming in on?
Some interesting things.
Interesting things. Oh, I heard a beacon. I don't know. Anyway, Roger. Interesting things.
It's all interesting.
Yeah, we can zoom in on this
extra
interesting sand if you'd like. I know Andy's interested in it.
I am. I'm all about the sand for whatever reason.
Sand Andy, they call him.
Sandy.
Or is it Sandy Andy?
Sandy Andy.
I'll take that. That works.
Yeah, that's not bad.
No.
That's kind of a cute nickname.
Yeah. Some cool mollusks on that barnacles. Rock right there. It's amazing how they aggregate. Just so many of them.
Sure that's not your sandies between the battery oil surface?
Sand aggregations?
Yeah, sand. I mean,
might be.
That's your wheelhouse, sand, right?
It is.
Like,
I mean, everybody's got to claim some turf here. Oh, wow, look at that Walteria.
Yeah, I was looking at him.
That's beautiful. So tall.
He's a big one.
That is a huge. Does that have something in it?
Have
shrimp living
sure
inside?
But if you were following what he said, we're gonna zip up through past this plateau.
I know, I can't help myself.
Oh, bite your lip, Andy.
So we are coming to you live from Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument and World Heritage Site.
You're in charge of where we go.
And this habitat and all the amazing creatures that you've been seeing is all fully protected. 580,000 square miles of ocean protected area and some terrestrial areas, about 6 square miles of land, of which is completely occupied by seabirds right now. NOAA is considering this area as a national marine sanctuary, and we're initiating that process next month in December, right around the corner, in a couple days. So we're going to have 4 public meetings on Zoom in December. We'd love to have you participate in those and tell us what you think about enhancing the protections for this area even further through a National Marine Sanctuary designation. So go to our website, papahanaumokuakea.gov, and you could provide comment on there, or you could participate in the meetings, and we're accepting comments in Hawaiian language, Aloha Hawaii, as well as English, and we'd love to hear from you. That comment period extends through January 31st next year, so please please participate in that and tell us what you think. We'd love to hear from you.
All right, so I have a weird question for you.
Ooh.
Weird. Okay, let's say after this cruise, I decide to come up here on my own and cheat and come up here and take something, but I get caught.
Uh-huh.
So what would happen to me?
Well, so the question of enforcement always comes up. So the enforcement for this area primarily falls under 2 different domains. The U.S. Coast Guard, they conduct overflights over this area and do some monitoring via some of their ships, but mostly it's overflights over the area.
No, I'm not talking about getting caught. So, I mean, I'm caught.
You're caught?
Yeah, so what would be the penalty for...
Execution.
Execution, okay.
No. It really depends. I don't know, but we'd have a fair and trial. We'd assume you're innocent at first because this is the United States. Yes.
Fish.
We have...
To the right. Not leaving the screen.
Yes, there is.
Nice.
What are you?
Snap zoom.
Ooh, silvery. Long.
This is Synaptobranchus brevidorsalis.
Ooh, is that the first one we see of its kind?
That's really
That was
long.
a guess. I was just trying to guess from here.
Common name is Long Boy.
Actually, I think I'm right there. I would go with Synaptobranchus brevidorsalis.
Oh, nice. Backwards. Beep, beep,
I can't do
beep.
that.
Oh, forwards.
Forwards again.
I don't know where I want to go.
Hercules is not a good predator.
Look at
There's
that.
no
Look at
sneaking
that
up on animals. And
sponge with the two tops on the we haven't seen that before. The branching stuck with two apex.
Yeah, I'm
Cool.
almost certain this is Breva dorsalis. I can now see the origin of the dorsal fin very clearly, and it's way back on its body. And that's what the name implies. Breva dorsalis is short and dorsal. So that was good.
Thank you.
That was a perfect angle too. Anyway, would there be a big fine?
Thanks, Trevor.
Would there be a
Yeah,
jail?
sure. So based upon other interactions with like some fishing events that have fished just over the border, there were fines that were levied against them. It really depends upon what the action is, what the response would be. Likely be a fine.
What are you planning on doing, Chris?
Yeah.
Well, I have to figure that out. But I was just sort of interested in also for the viewers to know. I mean, basically, if we're talking about protection, I like to know that it really is protected, that there is a very strong penalty for people who violate the rules in this place. And that's kind of what I was getting at.
It's a good call.
Yeah,
Not just a slap on the wrist.
Well, so the monument was created as under a proclamation, which is an executive order issued by President Bush originally, and then Obama expanded the monument, and that did include some corresponding regulations, which has includes penalty structure and things like that, but the monument penalty structure for the expanded area is not as, let's just say it's not as strong as the National Marine Sanctuaries Act, which includes very well-defined penalties and other structures like for damage, like if a ship ran aground, doing damage assessments, dipping into special funds to help to recover those communities and to pursue more direct penalties against anybody who might commit that. So that is what sanctuary designation or National Marine Sanctuary would bring to this area. It would bring a more well-defined regulatory structure, particularly for the expanded area.
If a ship ran aground right here, I'd be very impressed.
Yeah, they would be very impressed, but we do have a lot of shallow areas. I mean, we are one of only 16 particularly sensitive sea areas in the world. I think it's at 16 right now. And particularly sensitive sea area is an international maritime organization designation that basically tells mariners, if you're going to traverse this area, you've got to let the agency know what you're carrying, when you're going to enter, when you're going to leave, if you're carrying any hazardous cargo or things like that. Areas like the Florida Keys are also protected under particularly sensitive sea area. So that's an important designation for international maritime groups. But yeah, getting back to the original question, my final answer would be that a National Marine Sanctuary, particularly in the expanded area, Papahanaumokuakea, would bring a stronger regulatory structure and penalty structure for if an act were committed, such as collecting of a sponge without a permit.
Without a permit.
Or a squat lobster for that matter. But yeah, so.
Okay, yeah, thanks. I've just never really heard about it. I assume that there's some pretty stiff penalties there, but I was just curious as to what they are. In some cases, I think, at least in the main Hawaiian Islands, under certain circumstances, the boats
sorry,
have
Chris,
been
can I interrupt a second?
Yes, you can.
So I'm just a little confused. Do we want to go fast over this flat bit, or do you want to go slow with the chance that you might want to sample?
No, just keep going fast over this flat area if you could,
Roger,
please.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, or 100, your call.
Oh, Andy, I have a question.
Yeah,
following up for that.
Sure.
So how would this new designation of a sanctuary protect this area from executive orders?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. Thank you for that. So because a monument is created through a proclamation, through a presidential executive order, it is not as strong as a congressionally designated act, which National Marine Sanctuaries are created through congressional designation, which a presidential executive order can be reversed by a following president. So we saw that actually in the Northeast Canyons Marine National Monument, Northeast Canyons, yeah, off the east coast of the U.S. That designation, they reversed it essentially, and then when this current administration came in and put it back in place. So that's the danger of a proclamation and an executive order, is that it can be reversed by another big president in the future.
So let me ask you something else, sort of a follow-on, and this is kind of where I was leading to anyway, in a very convoluted way. And
well, you're a sponge guy. Sponges are convoluted.
Well, so this is what I'm getting at. There's very few monuments or protected areas that also have a very strong cultural component to them.
Yep.
And it seems to me that because this is rather unique, the penalties ought to be stiffer, because in a way, you're also violating a cultural treasure in a way, not just sort of a environmental protected area.
Yeah, true.
And that's kind of what I was ultimately trying to get at there. Like,
yeah, I mean, the reason for my my hesitancy in response is, as many of you know who have been involved in natural resources management or have had any kind of followed it, typically national resource penalties for resource damage or extraction are often hard to prosecute, and they are also often not as stiff as they should be. And what you pointed out, Chris, is the challenge. Certainly, I mean, this area has great cultural significance. It has great natural value, and as far as I'm aware, there isn't an additional penalty structure based upon like some type of cultural damage for the deep sea. I mean, for the Nihoa and Mokumanamana that are on the National Register of Historic Places, also they have a much more stringent penalty structure for removing any kind of materials from those islands and sacred spaces. But in the deep sea, it gets a little more complicated. Yeah. Okay. But yeah, I think if anything, over the 20 years that I've been with the monument, we've charted so much new ground. We rebooted the entire World Heritage process for the United States when we became a World Heritage Site. There hadn't been a designation in over 10 years, so 15 years. So who knows? I mean, maybe there will be an additional discussion regarding that. But as far as I'm aware right now, I'm not aware of any additional discussion on that from a cultural standpoint.
Okay. All right. Well, what we're doing right now, we'll get back to our seafloor here. Thanks very much for the answer. So we're kind of moving fast over sort of a flats and a little bit of a boring area until we get to a steeper spot, which is just up ahead, just because we're somewhat limited in time. And then once we get into a steeper area, then we're gonna hopefully see some more stuff, and we'll slow down a bit and see what we can find.
And another question: how can the public support this cause for the sanctuary? Is there a petition somewhere that can be signed, or?
Well, we're the agency that's considering it. That's NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, along with the state of Hawaii at this point. So I can't advocate for or against it. All I'm saying at this point, to initiate the process, we are asking for your commentary, and you can do that through the website. There may be other groups that are advocating for it or not. You'll have to you'd have to find them on your own. But as far as public right now, what you can do is go onto the website and say what you think, and wow, you're watching this video. These are some amazing habitats. You'd like to see it, whatever you want to say. You want to see it preserved for the future, whatever that might be. We'd love to hear that. We'd love to hear your comment on that. But as far as advocacy, I can't cross that boundary with my as being a NOAA employee.
Well, there is so much that we can. Go ahead, Aaron.
Oh, no, sorry, I was talking to Antonella about the Zoom.
It's a pretty ratty looking crinoid.
Yeah,
like most
it's been
of
worked.
Most of its arms been bitten off.
Yeah, so we can go to the website, papahanaumokuakea.gov, and look for the sanctuary designation, and there's an area where you can provide your comment right online and your input, and that's where at this point, we're just starting this process, so that's what we'd like to hear is your opinion on considering it as a National Marine Sanctuary. And there's a lot more information on there about why we're considering this and what the benefits might be, so you can take a look on there and get a little more information and decide for yourself.
Yeah, thank you to all of our viewers asking these questions and showing a lot of support from different parts of our country.
Yeah, thank you.
And there is so much beauty that we are seeing in colors and diversity of organisms, corals, sponges, fish, but there's a lot that we cannot see yet. And that's the work that Dr. Beth Orcutt is working on. There is a lot of microbiology that we won't be able to see and understand until a lot of biogeochemical analysis will be done, and that takes quite a few months. So it's very interesting to understand the microbiology, the microsystems that actually support the bigger systems as well.
The dead Walteria.
So how long will the brittle stars hang on even after the sponge is no longer alive? I mean, well, I guess they don't get anything from the sponge, but they are by getting up into the water column, right? So they'll just continue to use it as a
yeah, that's correct. That's my impression.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the name of the game down here, is to get high up in the water column so you can expose yourself to more food flowing by in the water. So that's why you see so many of these organisms climbing up on top of other corals or sponges. And in most cases, they're not interacting, they're not causing any damage to the sponge or the coral. They may actually defend it from other organisms, but they're not damaging it unless it's like a sea star. Sea stars do damage it. We've seen several of them eating some of these bamboo corals and black corals down here. So they are a predator of corals. But these brittle stars and basket stars and squat lobsters and other guys, they climb up on top of these to get up into the water column to get more access to food.
Tom in Ohio is wondering, if we turn off the lights, would we be able to see any bioluminescence?
We would if we were sort of hitting plankton, or plankton was hitting us in the water. It tends to flash when there's a physical contact. And that's the reason why there's a researcher who used to be at Harbor Branch, Dr. Edie Witter. She developed this sort of technique called a splatter screen. And it's a big round disc. And it's I don't know the material, but I think it's sort of translucent so you can see light through it. And then they would use the Harbor Branch submersible there. They would run this thing with lights out, and the bioluminescent plankton would hit against the screen and light up, and they were recording all the patterns that they would see with different types of organisms there. So that's it. You would see probably also some organisms just flashing spontaneously in the water column.
At this depth?
Well, I don't know so much at this depth. You know, normally they don't really turn the lights out at this depth because it's a little bit hazardous for the vehicles, of course, with lights out. But
that's a very interesting pattern of sedimentation on top of those rocks.
yeah, the sediment is kind of highlighting the pillow lava formations, which is my interpretation of the sort of bubbly, those kind of bulbous sort of lobes right there, or lobate type of structure.
I got a question about the manganese nodules. I guess we're seeing a little bit of manganese encrusting on these things. That's the little bumps, right?
Yeah,
so that comes through the water, right? And it precipitates out of the water over lots and lots and lots of years.
Well, yeah, and then
so
Dr. Orcutt said on this trip, which I had never heard about, that some of the water comes from underneath the sediment because you find nodules and sediment. So you get pore water coming up and then other water on top of it.
Happy to pull out?
Okay. So I guess the question was like,
point where it's not
where
great.
does the manganese start from? Obviously it's floating through the water and precipitates out, but where did it get into the ocean in the first place from?
Aphrodite, do you want to handle that one?
Oh, blue water question?
Except we're on blue water.
I'm just kidding. Again, it's my stupid way of saying I have no clue whatsoever.
Oh my god.
I was going to say watch out on the blue water thing because we're in blue water.
That's us, yeah. It sounds like a dinner relief question.
Yeah, any question.
It's a very good question.
Because I wonder if it comes from a concentrated area. Like we see a lot of heavy metals, etc., in concentrated seams, or even whether it's coal or whether it's gold or zinc or whatever, that comes in kind of more concentrated areas, and they mine the ore and then refine it. And that's how we get those materials. But where does the manganese come from?
Well,
This is the concentrated ore, I guess.
One potential big source, of course, but I'm not sure because I don't know about that, is whether it actually comes from undersea volcanic eruptions, because there's lots of minerals that come out of vents and from these eruptions. But I wasn't going to say that because I don't know. I mean, there's other materials I think I'm fairly familiar with. I don't know really what comes out of those, but I suspect that may be a source in addition to terrestrial, from runoff or something. Right?
Okay. Interesting.
It's a very good question. Manganese cycling in the world is sort of interesting. So one of the sort of interesting things is when Antonella zoomed in on that unbranched coral with that crinoid that had the two arms kind of bitten off of it.
Oh, yeah.
It gave me a chance to look at the polyps on that unbranched coral, and that was actually one of the things I've been curious about, because I'm seeing a lot of these whips, if you will, these unbranched corals that I'm pretty sure are not Candidella gigantea, and they are not the bamboo corals either. And so I could actually see.
What are we zooming on?
I could actually see. This is a different one. I'll find one for you a little bit later on. But I could actually see the polyps facing down, and I'm pretty sure this is an unbranched species of Narella, and it could have been something called Narella hawaiiensis. So there's another one, Narella calamus, but that's more toward the western Pacific, so more likely to be something like hawaiiensis. This is a Narella as well. This is a branched Narella, and right behind it is a long-legged shrimp, a Metacarcinus.
So Aaron, our video engineer, we have a question for you. Are we seeing the true colors?
I mean, we white balance it and stuff, but there's no light down here, and it is artificial light, so yes, sort of.
We're trying our best to show you true colors of the ocean.
I guess the way to sort of think about this is put your shoes in an animal down here. So what would an animal see down here? Well, they wouldn't see what we see because they're not producing any artificial light that's reflecting on things, and we are. So if you're talking about their ambient coloration, no, it's not true. But if we illuminate them with our lights, then we're seeing something. I don't know, is that an answer, Aaron, or am I way off base there?
No, definitely. But you'll notice too, like depending on the distance between the ROV and the bottom of the floor, or whatever we're zooming in on, the color will look different, and it's dependent on how much space and sediments we're shooting through. So if you watch sometimes, if we zoom in on something quite far away, it's going to look a different color than if we come closer and have our lights closer. And then we're not so dependent on the iris to open up and get more light. So yeah, it depends on where the vehicle is. This is, again, artificial light, but we do white balance and try to get close to the colors.
Thank you. This is a pretty woolly Iridogorgia.
Ooh. That's beautiful.
There was I think there was a description of something
Yep.
that's pretty woolly.
Woolly.
Woolly, it's a science term.
Yeah.
So this could be Iridogorgia species. Are you ready for it?
I'm ready.
Ooh.
Fireworks.
Uh-huh, it's my
That's cool.
favorite. It looks like fireworks.
Yeah, so this has got to be a Dr. Les Watling name here because he likes to do this. There was a very woolly Rodaniridogorgia, and for quite a few years he referred to it as Rodaniridogorgia Chewbacca.
Oh.
Kind of descriptive, and it immediately elicits a picture in your brain what it might look like.
Nice.
Everybody knows Chewbacca.
Yes. So I could take a going out on a limb crack at the manganese nodule answer question.
After Googling it.
After Googling it, yes, refreshing my memory. So one of the big factors and the reason why like areas like the Clarion-Clipperton zone and out here in the middle of the Pacific and the prime, what we call the prime crustal zone, one of the reasons why these areas we have much more the manganese is in the water, in the oceans, all the oceans, as are some of these other metals, cobalt, nickel, and things like that. And you have clear waters like you do in this part of the Pacific and also in the Central Pacific. There's not as much deposition of other materials on top of them. So the manganese is very slow process. You get like 10 millimeters a million years. So it's very, very slow. So if it's not buried by other sediment coming down from above, it can form. Whereas in other areas, there might be sedimentation from the top that buries it and doesn't allow it to form. So you need a stable environment, you need a low sedimentation rate, and not as strong current washing away these nodules as they're being, the material as it's being formed. And so that's why we get that in this area. So that's my
Good.
quick analysis and Google assisted answer.
So there's an interesting graph. I've done a number of talks on deep sea mining issues in the past. I started talking about it many years ago, and I found some old work about the mineral enrichment in manganese crusts, and it's actually quite astonishing. There's a whole spectrum of minerals when you compare the proportion of manganese, the proportion of the minerals within manganese crust versus the proportion of those minerals in terrestrial, rock or dirt, if you will. They're much higher in the manganese crust. That's why people are looking at it right now.
Yeah.
And there's quite a lot of things there, and not everything is commercially valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Quite a lot of enhancement. And so that's why we are doing this. We're trying to get ahead of the game here and do some survey work before mining happens in the future.
Yeah, it says here the Clarion-Clipperton zone alone, which is between Hawaii and Mexico, has 10 times more manganese than economically mineable manganese than all the mineable manganese on land today. It's just that one area. So that's part of the reason why it's in such interest.
Yeah.
Manganese, cobalt, iron. A lot of these materials would develop all our high-tech technologies today, iPhones, solar panels, they're all important components of our high-tech society.
So we have a question from one of our youngest biologists. She's a 9-year-old girl, Clara Poloka.
Hi, Clara.
So a big shout out to her.
Hello.
Hello.
And her question is, why would the density of life be greater on steeper slopes than flat?
That's a very good question, Clara.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sure is, Claire. And we think, because we don't know for sure, but we think it's because these steeper slopes are exposed to a higher current flow, water current. And a lot of these animals, they filter the water in order to feed. They aren't predators in the sense that they're not swimming around trying to catch things. They're actually adhering or stuck onto the bottom, and they're filtering the water to get small particles of food, as well as very small crabs and shrimp and things like that. And the higher the current flow, the more animals that they will encounter.
Sorry, I didn't catch
more
that.
Food particles they'll encounter. So that's why we think they're on steeper slopes. That's a good question, Clara.
Yeah, really good.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question, and thank you for the answer.
So where are the animals? We are on the
There's some
steeper slope.
anemones. Come on, Chris.
We just talked about why there are more animals on the steeper slope, and this slope is making a liar out of me.
No, you just can't see them.
Well, we just need to get up a little higher, I think. I'm hoping, but I don't know.
It's also about the currents. So one of the things is how steep, how like sharp the ridge is. So even though it's steep, if it's kind of rounded at the top, it might not create as much current flow as like a steep ridge, which if the current's running against it and it goes over the top, it'll kind of swirl and eddy around the backside. So that's one of the things you were looking for in these dive planning, right? Was the kind of steeper ridges.
Yeah. We're just trying to understand it, actually. We're trying to do enough dives on different types of topographies so we can start to see patterns, because that's really the way you learn.
Mm-hmm.
You make observations. I mean, that's sort of classic science, is that you make observations, and then once you've got enough observations, a pattern emerges that leads you to the answer of what you're trying to ask. That's really what we're trying. We haven't made enough observations yet, and so, but we're accumulating them. And what's really great with these particular ROVs and the way the data is being handled and the video is handled right now, all of these observations are being warehoused, they're being analyzed, and they're being made available and compiled so that scientists around the world can actually start looking for these patterns that we're trying to discover.
Yeah, there's not, I mean, some of these seamounts that we were diving on hadn't even been mapped by high-resolution bathymetry. They certainly, everything you're seeing on this whole expedition is the first time humans are setting eyes on these habitats. And we're in a very remote, it took us 3 days to get here from Honolulu, just to get to the location. And so we're very far out there, and these islands aren't, these seamounts aren't really visited at all. And so it's all new.
Yeah, so I'll just throw out a sort of an interesting question, and we don't have enough information on it, but would you find higher densities and better communities on the northern side of the Hawaiian Ridge or the Hawaiian atolls and banks versus the southern side? Well, we're on the southern side right now, so we're getting some data on the southern side as well, and that ridge actually is a current barrier, and it does some interesting things with current. And so the question is, are we on sort of the lee side or something, whereas if we were on the northern side, would we actually see richer communities? And there is a potential clue to that, and that's from the work that was done by the Okeanos and the musician seamounts, which are on the northern side, and there are some really beautiful communities there in the musicians, but also next spring, for all of you deep sea explorers out there, the Nautilus is going to be doing a cruise up on the northern side in an area called the Liliuokalani Seamounts, and maybe we'll see something there. Maybe we'll see communities that are even richer than what we've seen down here. So, I mean, there's so many questions that we need answered down here in order to start to understand basically deep sea life, if you will. So, and right now we're gathering data. That is our role. We are surveying, we are gathering data about, what type of creatures are down here. We collect specimens when we see new species. We're grabbing rocks to better understand the age of these seamounts. We're surveying with the video, which will all be analyzed. And look at that guy.
That's a big fish.
Yeah.
Was that one of those sharks?
I don't think so. I think
That is a fast fish. Can you see it in Argus? It's like gone already.
I think it was
could have been
shark.
a really.
It was pretty wide, pretty beefy.
Yeah, just didn't have to replay that one.
Didn't look like it had just a full like eel-like.
There's
totally
a fish
tail.
down there. No, it's not. Sorry, coral. Yes, sirree, Bob. Mistakes a coral for a fish.
So
you know why I said that is because on the last watch they got one of the Chunnacops coloratus on it that took off. Yeah, and it looked just like that sort of little red blotch right there on the sediment until they got closer.
There's a big coral off to the left you can see in Argus view.
Left to the left. Oh yeah, that's right.
I have another question here. Would a serious storm deposit more sediment or remove sediment from the crevices where you are at this depth? And how long do you have to wait for the water to clear after a storm? That's a...
Let me just first point out what this is a bamboo coral. That's the big coral colony that we're passing right now. Gonna let them make their switch first before we continue. We've got a dinner time change of team here, so allow some of us to go get something to eat.
Yeah, and we did have a really good discussion about that storm impact about down deep a couple of days ago, and I think it was Ken Sulak who told us that one hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico or the Atlantic, I can't remember, they had some current loggers on the bottom and did find that
just a moment here.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Dan, are you on Science Channel yet? I can't hear you.
Sorry, now
I'm on. Great.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Just so you know, I don't know if Trevor mentioned this, but since we only have an hour left, we're making a push to get as far up as we can.
Roger.
We can.
What speed are you guys going?
You can ask Aaron that, I guess.
Okay. They were doing 20-meter moves at bearing 200. I'm just going to jump that up to a 50-meter move, same bearing, 0.5 knots. Sounds good?
Sure.
Do it.
Bridge, now.
I don't know, but let's try 0.3. We're pretty steep here, so
Copy.
I might not be able to keep up. We're just going up. Like
50 meters, bearing 200 at 0.3 knots.
Oh, she's got the training wheels on up here. I'm going to turn that stuff off here. Sorry. Why is it not going?
Oh, just try gain down?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we're hoping to see some type of sudden break in sort of or a sudden abundance of animals as we get higher and closer to the summit. And that would be valuable to see.
Copy.
But so far we haven't seen that. We've seen scatters and patches and typical sort of a boulder type of thing, but we haven't.
Slide over and follow the crack here. Maybe there'll be some critters on that.
Yeah, that's kind of it. We're just trying to get at this whole idea of more animals closer to the summit, see whether that's really true in all cases, which I'm pretty sure is not, but. So we're currently at 1,742 meters on Euphemia seamount. Name presumably comes from a ship. It's a volcanic cone, so there isn't going to be a flat top like what we were diving on last night. We're assuming that all of this is basalt or volcanic rock.
Yeah, and can I get back to the check? We're settled enough to go back to the question?
I can't remember what the question is
Dan,
now.
it looks
A question about
based on the
like
contours, it's
if
gonna
a
be
strong
consistently
storm
like this.
passed through this area, would it
what's that,
disturb
Gavin?
sediment at this depth? And we had a good conversation about that a couple days ago. And Ken Sulak told us that there were acoustic Doppler devices moored at the substrate at 500,000 meters, 1,500 meters depth during the passing of Hurricane Ivan. And they found that the currents did increase up to 5 knots during passage, and they also reversed the exact opposite of the normal bottom current. So a strong storm can significantly affect, at least down to that depth, and it would stir up a lot of this fine sediment. And I don't have an answer as to how long it would take to settle back out again, but we can see surface storm impacts at this depth.
Wow.
All right, yes.
Some type of little debris channel here that we're following up.
Yeah, I'm lateraling back and forth while we're waiting for Argus to get back in the ball game.
Yeah. Hoping to find the glory hole of sponges and corals up here. We're getting a few more things starting to show up. Maybe we're going to get, maybe it's going to pick up.
We can keep the delta at par on this slope if you want. No, you can keep the view, but you can make the delta 0. Oh, yeah. Okay, we'll keep it 8. We'll keep it where it is then. I'll wait. Oh, yeah. I'd like to keep a view on the, so that'll help if, it'll help us spot, yeah, agreed.
So that fortunate data collect under Hurricane Ivan that Andy was talking about also resulted in some wave measurements under Hurricane Ivan. There were several that were, numerous waves that were 15 meters in height and a few that were 25 meters. So
wow.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, that's how angry the sea can get under a hurricane like Ivan was.
And assume in terms of in your field, Emil, as well, it's all about the energy that storm contains and how that energy is used to displace water, I gather.
Yeah, the wave height is determined by the strength of the winds, how long the winds blow, and the fetch over which the winds blow, the area of the sea surface affected by the winds. So those 3 ingredients came together for some monster waves.
Wow.
Speed seems to be all over the place.
With a ship?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's moving sideways, I guess.
And the moves aren't really on. They're usually plus or minus 5 degrees of what we're calling.
Right, yeah, understood. That's because he's moving sideways.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe if we could come down a little bit, we're not going to be able to see any animals this high up.
Yeah, sorry, I got drifted away there.
Okay, thank you.
You can stay. I'll just come down below you. Get back in the box here. Tempted to bump up the speed now.
I am ready to make another move, and I was going to change the bearing from 200 to 185.
Roger.
Keeps us on the... I'm actually going to do 180, knowing their trend.
Yeah, I think it's got the lay of the land now. I'm happy to bump the speed.
Okay. Bridge, nav. Can we move 50 meters at bearing 180? We can bump up the speed to 0.5 knots.
Just a few things. Little, I don't know if that's a coral or a sponge. There's a bamboo coral.
The one on the top?
Yeah,
Yep.
that one. These are dead sponges in front of us. But call these sparsely branching bamboo corals. We've seen a fair number of them during the cruise. But there's life up here.
Yeah, it was a very nice collection of sponges when we regained the slope.
Yeah. No, I was looking at that boulder that you guys were imaging for
Yeah.
a while. There was a nice little pile of polyopogon on that boulder. So
A question came in asking, have we found any fossils or artifacts on this expedition so far?
there were two things. One of them was sort of a manganese covered beak, or the skull, I guess, of a beaked whale, which is extremely unusual. Beaked whales, and I think I heard that this was Cuvier's beaked whale, can dive extremely deep. They're known for that. They may surface, maybe only once an hour, very briefly, and they'll go down to 800,000 plus 1,500 meters. So I guess it wouldn't be surprising that a deep diving whale, you'd find some remains of that. So that was one thing, what was very cool. And the other thing that was very cool was there was a rock that was out of place. And right now speculation is that it was used as ballast on some voyaging canoe or ship or something. Very, very old.
Yeah.
So yeah, two very interesting things like that.
This is an interesting lava feature.
Yeah, it is. I was just looking at that too. Argus view kind of showed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just floating up now at 8 meters a minute. Yeah, just letting the vehicle float up. So.
Couple of dead sponges. Be partially alive, but the one on the right, but they're not very healthy, let's put it that way. Not sure why. We've seen a fair number of.
Seems like most of those in the leaf sponges are dead or dying.
Yeah, not really sure why.
Can they be loved to death by brittle stars? It restricts the flow of water through them.
Here's some more consolidated substrate here that might be more productive. In fact, I can see some sponges in the Argus view over here. This might be a good path, Dan, to try to scoot up toward the summit.
Yeah.
We have a viewer wondering, how far is it in between the lasers? It's 10 centimeters. It's really helpful when we come across either a rock we're interested in or species, so we can see just how large they are. But it is 10 centimeters.
And all of those sponges are all facing in the same direction, which is sort of perpendicular to the course we're taking right now. So they sort of serve as current meters in a sense. So the assumption is that they're indicating the prevailing current is moving sort of horizontally across the slope rather than just up or down. I don't know, would that be your interpretation, Emil?
Yeah, it sounds like Hercules head south facing south, and those were pointing east, I guess.
East-west, or yeah, I don't really, sometimes I don't understand which side.
To the right, actually to the west, yeah.
Yeah.
So
There's a couple more big ones right there.
yeah.
Polyopigon. There's one sponge coming up in the Argus view. One solitary guy. It's reasonable size.
Chris and Emil, there's a question on how old might these volcanic features be?
Well, that's what we're trying to determine, and that's why we're collecting rocks. You know, we don't need any more ballast. We want to grab these rocks and then use some processes to actually try to determine the age of these seamounts. But looking at the crusting already and looking at what we're hypothesizing is the origin of these seamounts, we think they're somewhere between 70, 80, 90 million years old. So they're very, very old.
Yeah.
They date back to when T-Rex was roaming the land, in the terrestrial parts of the world.
Sea level was a couple 100 feet higher because we were in a greenhouse Earth condition.
Yeah.
Pre-ice age.
Yes, please. Yeah, then we'll keep it moving in half a knot.
And these would have been located at the time, I guess, much further southeast.
Yes, right. Closer to the equator. There's a live Walteria on the left and a Polyopigon on the right, and a couple dead Walterias there amongst the mix. Walteria on the left, of course, is interesting because it shows you a function of these sponges. It's not just filtering the water, but they're providing actually a perch for a lot of other animals who want to get up further in the water column. Now, why would they want to do that? Well, it's because very close to the substrate, there's friction as water moves across these rocks, and it slows the rate of current flow, is what I supposedly understand. And if you can get a little ways up away from that substrate, the current starts, increasing to what, the I guess you'd say the non-substrated water is moving. And that little zone where you go from, I guess you could call it a normal current speed, on the one that's slowed as a result of friction against the bottom, is generally referred to as the benthic boundary layer, if I'm not mistaken. They'd like to get up close as possible out of that. Oh, look at this guy.
Nice color.
Bolosoma species B. They're all yellow, they're beautiful. And the one on the left is something else. It's a different group of sponges altogether. It's in a different group. Why is it yellow? No idea.
There's a dad joke in there somewhere.
There's a bad joke.
A dad joke.
Yeah, I'll bet I know what it is too, and ain't going there.
Salate.
This is not your typical sipping sponge. You remember the old Lipton iced tea ads. These are very different than your shallow water sponges. Okay. I'm going to grab a quick bite to eat, and I'll be back in a few minutes, and Andrea Balbus is going to sub for me while I get some chow. I'll be back.
Looks like a bunch upslope to the left too. That's a nice one.
Did we get a rock on this shift yet? Do we know? Look at that sponge.
No, we haven't.
Yeah, these don't look so great.
I got enough leash to make it around there.
Well, you came at impeccable timing. Somebody's wondering, have we found any significant lava caves?
We have not yet found any significant lava caves. We are keeping our eyes peeled, especially when we come to the top of things like a guyot that we know had once been at the surface. We did find columnar jointing, though. We found these basalt columnar joints that we was at last dive.
Did I pull you all the way around?
And they were near the top of the guyot. I think they were about 200 meters from the top.
Wow.
Which way do I need to turn here? That way. Yeah, sorry, lost the plot there for a minute.
Is that a fish down there? No, it's a part of a sponge.
Yeah, we've been here already. I got turned around.
Got about another half hour on the seafloor or so.
Yeah, I'm not anywhere close to that.
We have only a half hour, you say?
About that.
And we don't have that many rocks.
So we want to be on the lookout, huh?
Yeah, Dan, if you can be on the lookout for some angular rocks.
Roger.
They'll have to come from the top of the screen. We've got a bit of layback.
Gotcha.
I got some catching up to do. I went the wrong way there.
Roger, Dodger.
Trying to hurry up and get up to these white dots here.
All right, turning and burning.
Ship is just finishing a move. Should we let it settle out and have a
you
look?
can keep going.
Okay. Bridge nav, 20 meters, 180. Back in the box.
Back in the box.
That should be the song that we write for Nautilus, Back in the Box.
Does need to be a theme song.
Does seem to be a theme song.
In our case, always out of the box.
You're out of the box. Back in the box again.
All right, Andrea. Someone's wondering. You can sing this answer if you'd like to, but someone's wondering, why are you interested in angular rocks?
We are interested in angular rocks because we are interested in dating the rocks. And in order to do so, we need to have the original chemistry intact, which will be in the original crystals that formed upon cooling. And if the rock is rounded, or looking like it's soft or covered with a lot of manganese crust, it has probably been exposed at the surface and interacted with the water over tens of millions of years. If the rock is angular, it may have been inside and not exposed over the entirety of the age of the seamount, and less chance that it is altered. And an altered rock no longer carries its original chemistry that allows us to date the rock.